One of the most terrible aspects of the Nazi Shoah was the extent to which the Jews were forced to supervise their own destruction, taking positions of intermediate responsibility in the hope of making the outcome less brutal. They chose who lived and died. They supervised labour camps. Incongruously, they organised concerts. They provided a screen for Red Cross visits, and they cajoled their people into the gas chambers. Idealists then and since have said they should rather have refused and let the Germans get on with it, taking all the guilt on their own heads. But this is surely unrealistic. Not only do people have a genetic compulsion to survive, but they know from experience that temporizing quite often works. That in just one day, divine intervention may change the situation, or more realistically, the liberating army might arrive. This is why theoretical ethical principles are of very limited practical use. This is precisely the situation in which Israel's brick-making supervisors find themselves in Pharaoh's Egypt, such that they blame Moses and Aaron's religious zeal for getting them into their current situation whereby they have to gather their own straw before they can make their tally of bricks, and the tally remains the same as it was when they were supplied with straw. But unlike the supervisors in the concentration camps, these supervisors are told by Moses and Aaron that the Lord is about to sort the whole thing out. Meanwhile, this dual leadership is negotiating in bad faith, saying they only want to go into the wilderness to sacrifice before coming back into captivity. But Pharaoh knows as well as they do that they're negotiating in bad faith. Thus, when Jesus is sending out his followers, he isn't sending them out purely to be as innocent as doves, but also as wise as serpents, because they are in danger of being persecuted and even killed. Every time I read this passage, I think of Robert Bolt's account of the martyrdom of Thomas More, in which the skilled lawyer does everything he can, other than conceding his great principle, to avoid martyrdom, which rather speaks against the rather hysterical urge of some zealots of the early Christian church to bring martyrdom down on themselves. But at a less dramatic level, these two readings warn us against what I would call moral absolutism. We all know this in a practical way by, for instance, admitting that we can kill in self-defense and steal bread if we're starving. But we're less comfortable, for example, with the issue of telling lies to save ourselves from trouble, although we seem more indulgent about telling lies to save others from trouble. All of which goes to show, it seems to me, that a table of ethics like the commandments isn't quite what we need, because it lacks a context within which to operate. So what might that framework be? Well, there might be 3 Christian principles which should govern the operation of ethical behaviour. First, the more difficult a decision, the longer we should pray about it. Secondly, we should examine an issue from our own point of view and be suspicious, at least, of solutions which suit our own convenience. And thirdly, we should not seek to apply our ethical standpoints to the behaviour of others, but we should assume that their circumstances are not precisely the same as ours. These seem to be simple principles, but it will not take much thought to realize that all three principles are easily overlooked or overridden. But the two readings for today pose wider issues because the Jewish supervisors of captive Israel and the followers of Jesus are not operating as individual moral agents responsible for sorting out their private ethical dilemmas. The supervisors are obligated to protect those they supervise as best they can and are entitled to doubt the word of Moses and Aaron in the matter of God's liberating promise. And the followers of Jesus would also have to take the best possible steps to maintain their newly founded Christian communities against persecution. The responsibility in these circumstances is enormous, as we know from the accounts of those in the concentration camps who were intermediates between the persecutors and the persecuted. For us, most of all, this means adopting a much less robotic approach to ethics, which will immediately excite the taunt of relativism, that without firm principles, everybody is left to please themselves. Indeed, they are. And that's the entire point. We were made to please ourselves in order that we might love God of our own free will. Preachers of adherence to an absolute moral code are making two claims which are both absolutely against the foundational principles of Christianity. Their first claim is that there's only one rigid way of obeying God when our created purpose is to love. Secondly, the corollary claim that there is only one way is the claim to judge those who do not adhere, or at the very least, do not appear to adhere. Far from being easy, the exercise of ethical judgment is much more difficult than rigidly adhering to a set of rules. We are much more vulnerable out in the ethical marketplace than we are locked in an ethical prison. But as disciples, sent out as serpents as well as doves, our place is to be public, not private Christians. Amen.